Okay, there's
Hi, Kate.
Kate. Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, good evening. This is the April 10th meeting of the Land Acquisition and Preservation Committee. I'd like to start with a call to order and introduction of the members here. I am Ann Kennedy, the chair, and I'm going to go around and introduce even our non-members.
Jackie Barton, representing the Katuitt Fire District.
Thank you.
Phyllis Miller, Katuitt.
Tracy Pratt, Katuitt.
Kate Gulliver, Hyannis.
David Anthony, Director of Asset Management.
Doug Payson, Barnstable Village.
Liz Lewis, West Barnstable.
Farley Lewis, Hyannisport.
Elisa Crowley, Barnstable Village.
Ann Rowland, Centerville.
Jenna Zeno, Administrative Assistant.
Thank you. So I must add this. Please note that this meeting is recorded and broadcast on Channel 18 in accordance with MGL Chapter 30A, subsection 20. I must inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting, and if so, please make their presence known. Seeing none, we'll continue. We have to approve the minutes of February 13th because last meeting we didn't have a quorum. So has everybody had an opportunity to read those minutes? I know you approved them last time, but because there was no quorum, it doesn't count. So can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The next order is the approval of March 13th's meeting minutes. May I have you all been able to read those?
Yes.
Yep.
Jenna has done an excellent job with minutes, and we do appreciate that very much.
Bravo.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Nobody opposed, I hope? Good. Okay, so we have a couple of guests here. So I'd like to start with a report from David Anthony about several items from asset management.
Certainly, the reason for my being here first and primarily is for the conservation restriction that is associated with a project that we've been working on for over 2 years in the village of Katuitt. As many people may be aware, in 2009, the Katuitt Elementary School closed along with 4 other schools as part of a massive town-wide school reorganization. We were fortunate in Katuitt to enter into a contract with the Waldorf School so that the school was used actively for a period of 10 years, at which point in time, negotiations with the Waldorf School did not result in them entering into a new 5-year agreement. We kind of terminated it at a milestone in the contract. The school department voted to declare it surplus to their needs, and it became a municipal property. At that time, the Asset Management Advisory Committee, which was made up of 5 town councilors who were assisting in the disposal of town property and an evaluation of the highest and best use of town assets, had made the Katuitt Elementary School a bit of a priority because it was a large piece of property. The liability was $1 million to tear down the school based on hazardous materials, based on its construction. The building, unfortunately, was in pretty good shape, but without a clear-cut purpose and the ability to renovate it, which was going to approach close to $4 million to renovate. The decision was, how do we go about dealing with this property and not letting it languish? So at that time, one of the thoughts had been through the Asset Management Advisory Committee where we had public meetings, and I must say that the village of Katuitt came out in great numbers and participated. We had a robust discussion over 3 different meetings to talk about what should happen, everything from veterans housing to 3 2-acre buildable lots, which would generate close to the $1 million to tear down the property, to turn it into a revenue neutral kind of a situation, putting about $25,000 a year worth of taxes back onto the tax rolls. In all of them, it was built around the idea that the 13-acre parcel would be divided into 2 pieces. With the entrance from Main Street, if you're familiar with the property, the entrance from Main Street to the tennis courts and to the ball field remaining as town property, and a portion of the rest being the part that we would dispose of. During that conversation, the idea of water preservation came up, and it was a consistent theme because of the location of a well some 800, 900 yards to the south. So the Cotuit Fire District at that time made an active play for the property to be able to preserve appropriate boundaries and control of what was going to happen kind of upstream, if you will. I think there's a slide up on the screen if you're interested in the proximity of the well. The Cotuit Fire District also recognized that the opportunity to find land in proximity to a well, where the unfortunate reality is that at some point down the road, as testing gets better and emerging contaminants continue to raise their ugly head, they will find something in the water. And the ability to treat that water in Cotuit, where it is built up and built out around the wells, could be very costly because of land acquisition. So this became a real opportunity for them to have a place where they could create a water treatment center, not a septage plant, but a true water treatment center, and potentially have it become office space or work with the fire district and have that be an expanded fire station. A number of different ideas that really started to align themselves with the Cotuit Fire District. So the town actively began to plan back and forth, having multiple conversations. There was a subcommittee that was appointed to meet with the town manager on a regular basis. And we decided to come up with this plan of about 8 acres that would go to the Cotuit Water District, go to the Fire District, and about 5 acres that would be retained by the town, so that the recreation purposes could continue to be served in the village of Cotuit, recognizing there was not a lot of opportunity for that. We would grant each other access across each other's property to continue that flow through from Main Street to Old Oyster. An interesting development is that we found out that the leach field for the school is actually located pretty much under where the old playground used to be on the town parcel. So you have this kind of shared septic system now that if the building ever did come back on and you tried to use the septic system, we would have to have that arrangement. The power for the school comes on private poles from Main Street all the way across the property to the school. So those poles were going to have to be serviced and managed. So what we did was we started to develop a conservation restriction. Mark Robinson was able to help us and work through these issues so that we could create a document that the town would enter into with the Cotuit Fire District in the relationship where we would retain the property and the CR would be held by the fire district. So that, again, that proximity to the well, there could be a controlling element of what was going to happen on our parcel, the town's parcel. So there were certain things that are in there. The CR was sent around. It can be a pretty tough thing to read. But basically, the way it's structured is a conservation restriction says you can't do any of this stuff. And then 2 pages later, it's except for.
Yeah, we do this all the time, so we
We had
know.
a very robust conversation about how do we preserve the rights of the town to rebuild the ball field,
Yeah,
rebuild or expand the tennis courts,
Yeah.
preserving the recreational use.
so it's
Potentially a little
not
parking.
passive recreation, it's active recreation.
It's active, but we were going to do so with a true sense of where we were in proximity to the well.
Yeah.
And back and forth, we feel that we have a conservation restriction. It has been reviewed by legal in its current form, and we are now making the rounds. I will be at the planning board at 7 o'clock tonight to do the approval not required to split the parcel officially into 2, so that then we can have the CR that remains on the town-owned parcel. So I am here tonight to present our conservation restriction after a long amount of time.
Yep.
joined by Jackie, who's one
Yep.
of the members of the committee that's been working on this for coming up on almost 2 years.
Yes.
And I'm hoping Jackie can talk a little bit about the benefits to Katuitt and to the town and to the benefits of the CR from your point of view.
Sure. As David said, we started this project a couple of years ago. The pandemic kind of got in the middle of everything. But there's no doubt that this land is important to Katuitt's well field. The well field that it protects is Katuitt's, I believe it's Katuitt's oldest well. And the school is within 800 feet. And it's up gradient. So whatever happens on the land, especially where the school is important to that wellhead. So from that perspective, we went to a district meeting, got support, overwhelming support. I don't think it was absolutely unanimous,
Well,
but
pretty close.
almost. The bottom line being that then three of us, Jim Danhauser, Mark Lynch, and myself, began discussions with the town. And for 2 years, we've been working on trying to come up with something that protects the well field, and also important for the village is the recreational uses that are there. The land is not only used for baseball and tennis, and there's a set of trails that go through some tall woodland area off to the, I guess it would be the north of the driveway that goes through. It's along here, right along here. This is the forest.
Oops. What did you do?
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, you're very powerful.
Screen.
Sorry. Where was I? There we go. Anyway, that was a surprise. And so what was important for us was to maintain this recreational area, because especially this area here is important also for overflow parking, for events, for the 4th of July. There are activities there. And it's really the biggest piece of
It's the
open land in the village. And so it's used for a lot of reasons. But we don't, as a district, have the ability to maintain and care for recreational lands. And so we thought it was important that the town continue to do that. And we were lucky enough to come to an agreement that you see before you in terms of the conservation restriction that does all the things that we hope to do. This land also is important because it's upgrading of Katuitt Bay, so whatever we can do here to protect it. So part of the conservation restriction also prohibits the use of chemicals that might otherwise affect not only the well field and the downgrading and estuary. But it's a win-win, I think.
Would
'cause-
that preclude a fire station then if you're talking about chemicals?
Well, the conservation restriction is on the 5.5
Right.
acres,
Yeah.
right? So the town would be deeding this to us unrestricted. So in essence, we're being trusted to protect our own well.
Yeah.
And so, is that accurate?
That is 100% accurate, yes.
Exactly.
And we already protected it on the other side when Mr. Bornstein built his condos, in that we got the water department to put a conservation restriction on the back acreage of 2 acres to protect our well.
Oops, keep going the wrong way.
So much for that.
So what about the fire department now?
I have no idea about the fire
CR
department.
for Zone 1 is what Phyllis was talking about there.
Could I see that triangle that says 36? That's between the school and the
Yep.
field and the Katuitt Wells? And then there's also 50. What, are those privately owned parcels?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so,
They're big lots, family-owned. The family originally, the Pearsons, gave some of the land that went to make up the school.
So
okay.
is the school
So-
The school was loaded with asbestos and mold.
Okay.
So that, it's gonna, what happens with the
Yeah,
school?
what happens with the school?
So Katuitt being Katuitt,
Yeah.
we took one step at a time. And the first step is to come to an agreement with the town for us to own the land and the building. And we're accepting from the town, in essence, the gift of land and essentially $1 million liability,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a liability that the
Oh,
town would have
thank
had otherwise to tear it down. From our perspective, I say the three of us who have been in discussions with the town, that's where we stop, right, is getting the land transferred to us. Then it becomes another district discussion about what's going to happen. Bear in mind that we're acquiring this land for well field protection, and whenever the conversation goes anywhere else, I'm quick to remind people that that's why we're entering into this.
Okay.
It's why the town is entrusting the land to us, again, for Katuitt to protect its own well field. And so as we move forward, the district's going to have to decide, do they want to spend money on a fire department? Does a fire station potentially affect the well? Would it be better in its open and natural condition? There's also a proposal that's been floated around for the idea of a community center. In order for that to happen, there would have to be probably some kind of a nonprofit organization created, because again, that's not the business that the district is in. And so it'll be an interesting discussion. The longer things drag on, the more likely it is that the building will simply be torn down, because there's, as Phyllis said, there's asbestos in the building, there's mold growing because it hasn't been heated for the past 2 winters, and so as time marches on, it becomes, probably pretty clear that the building will be torn down, but no decision has actually been made as of yet.
But David, am I wrong in hearing that the town did remove the oil tank?
Actually, we received 7 bids on that. We're going to be making an award in the next week to 10 days, and the idea is to have that out before the annual meeting, which is in May, now that the weather's good. We were actually quite pleased to get that much interest. We had hoped that we'd get 1 or 2, and having 7 different companies come in shows us that we have a competitive opportunity there. The particular underground storage tank that is there is a double-hulled fiberglass tank. These were consistent with all the ones that were replaced in the late 80s at all of the other elementary schools. So far, those have all come out clean. The one at Osterville Bay being the most recent. That one came out clean. It's a relatively inexpensive project. Because you don't have a lot of steel, it actually just goes right into the dumpster and off it goes. So we're hoping that works out to our advantage.
Though, am I
It
understanding?
is down to a minimal amount. They come in the day of the removal and take
and
the
then
last
take
of
it
it,
out.
just in case rainwater or something else gets into it, so that they're able to then clean the inside so that it is
Yeah.
contaminant-free.
Good.
So that was one of the things that we worked out with this committee, was that the town was going to assume the responsibility of removing that. We are very fortunate that we just opened up bids for the Marston's Mills Elementary School, which is the same generation of school. The actual demolition, including all of the ad alternates, which were the extras that we put in, is about $700,000. The soft costs on top of that, design services, architect services, permitting, is around $250,000. So that school, very much like the Katuitt School, came in at under $1 million. So it could be assumed that this would come in under $1 million as well. And competition was pretty strong on that as well.
Good, good.
All right, so I'm just curious, because it seems to me if the number one purpose of putting this into CR is for drinking water protection, it seems like there are impervious surfaces that are going to be right on top of it, and I believe there's a septic tank in there, is that correct?
So there is a leach field.
Yes.
That is underneath. It is currently not active because it has been closed essentially for 2.5, 3 years since the Waldorf School left. We did put a provision in there that the leach field could be serviced and/or removed if in fact the building came down, because the ideal spot to put in any kind of new septic system would actually be in the far left-hand corner on Old Oyster, as far away from the well as possible, partly because that's outside of a zone of contribution and it is the highest point. It also puts it easily serviceable from the road. So it is highly likely that that leach field will either be abandoned in place or it will be removed as part of the demo of the school. As far as impervious, we are expecting that any additional parking that we would do would respect the idea of not putting more impervious pavement. The only place where there might be a little bit extra is if we were to expand the tennis courts by another 50%, and more than likely that would be pickleball courts. Those have to be done with a particular type of surface. Otherwise, they fall apart after 3 or 4 years. So that would be the only place where that would happen, and it
Okay.
could be that there's an offset because much of the parking around the school could be remodeled, could be reworked.
Oh, okay. Could it
So-
be reclaimed as open space, perhaps?
I
or
can't speak for the
with that?
Katuitt Fire District, but I think that that could be an issue that they would bring
That
up.
is something that a lot of people in the village would like us to keep it and have it as open space.
Okay.
Also acknowledging the fact that if the sewering does come from the bay and go up, that we could see where we might be asked to vote on a pumping station if the work with the base ever turned out and went to fruition. That's in the long planning stages of the water, the town DPW.
And Spot, you're spot on with your question, and I think it goes back to, the village is aware that the ultimate goal here is to protect the well field. And so as we discuss this, I think there'll be a lot of education and a lot of discussion. And getting rid of the current impervious surfaces would be primary. We could turn them into gravel parking areas, which would be much better. I do want to point out that in the conservation restriction, there's also a provision, I'm not good at this yet. Okay, here. Oh, wrong one, sorry, I went the wrong way. There's a provision for us to, I'll find it, it's the last slide, of course, right?
Yeah.
Of course. There's a provision for us to kind of expand parking here along we call it the driveway because it's not a road layout per se, but to expand parking along here, kind of just to pull in, to provide better parking for people here. But it's pretty clear in the conservation restriction that that would be gravel and not blacktopped.
What condition are the tennis courts in right now? Do they need to be resurfaced? And, I mean, how much play or use are they getting at this point?
That's our only source of recreation in the village,
Okay,
is there.
okay.
And so
I
in
mean,
the
the
summer,
tennis courts or the baseball field?
that whole parcel is our only place of
Public.
public
Yeah.
recreation in our village.
Okay.
There is no land, and there is no land that's available to
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah.
So it makes it very important for the community.
To your first question, the
Yeah.
current condition, they are decently playable. They are an older style. We have had some of the new technology that really meshes well with the Cape, with the shifting, I mean, it's a sandbar, let's be honest. When you start to pave
Right.
sand, it tends to break apart. So the Osterville Bay tennis courts and the pickleball courts out at West Villages are both built with this new technology of a particular type of concrete that is supposed to hold up much better in a Cape Cod environment.
And it's a little more pervious?
I can't speak to the technical capabilities.
I mean, there's different court surfaces you can put in for tennis,
Yep.
but that would be more pervious, but not everybody cares for them, but.
The Bay Lane courts had to be denetted
Yeah.
and are going to be removed because the repairs that were made were really a stopgap measure, and those have become a bit of a liability. So there are no nets there any longer, but that was an older technology that was literally pavement.
Yeah.
And it has not held up quite as well as we're hoping the Osterville Bay courts and the West Villages courts will.
I've never seen a CR, written this way. I know that the goal is to allow public access. So I just was like, wow, we're going to have pickleball courts, so I was kind of like, this is new.
We're used to
Well,
passive, we're used to
Yeah,
passive
so Are
recreation.
we setting a new precedent here?
It's the same courts that were the tennis courts, so
Yeah.
that it was just dual usage and inventive on the way of the public started to use it.
Right,
So a conservation restriction is meant to protect the land.
right.
Yep.
And we're protecting the land with this conservation restriction from future development, except for recreational purposes. Because the recreational purposes are really important here.
Okay.
And so I think the conservation restriction says that the tennis courts could basically become pickleball courts. Again, another discussion within the community as to whether that makes sense. There has been discussion along the way about whether to change the baseball field in some fashion. That's allowed for. Right now, the open field, I said, is used during the 4th of July for a special event and for parking during other special events in the village, with the necessity to have taxis going back and forth, basically. Frisbee, people walk their dogs, people run their dogs there. You'll see out there with their tennis balls, throwing them and their dogs running, because it's a nice, big, open field.
Yeah,
And I say, and walking through the woods. All that, but that's what we want to hold on to. We want to make sure that this doesn't become, housing or another built environment, basically.
Yeah. And we've had other, maybe not while you've been on the committee, but we've had other CRs where the recreation uses have been more active.
Yeah.
So this is not a precedent-setting CR.
Okay.
It's just a different type than we've been dealing with lately. So is there any questions or comments from anybody else? Is anybody ready to pose a motion to recommend approval from the town council?
I will move that we accept the CR as written
And recommend approval.
well, I do recommend approval.
Yeah, and recommend that the town council approve the CR. Yep. So does anybody second that motion? I'll second that motion. Can I have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Good. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
May I say that I don't know whether you might see this again, in the respect that there is someone new at the state level approving conservation
Yeah,
restrictions.
yeah, again.
And they have a new form, perhaps, so we might have to be jumping through hoops to satisfy that. But the language that's in here should remain the same. But if something dramatic happens in that process, I'll be back.
We still haven't approved Harju Amaral
Okay.
Princess. So, we're used to delays from the state.
Exactly, there you go.
Okay, so thank you very much. You are welcome to stay if you'd like.
If you will.
David, I want you to stay because you have other things to
I
say.
have a couple of things, absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as I'm out of here by 5 or 7. So.
All right, so why don't we continue with you? So one of the things on the agenda was an update from Grace, actually. So you're going to be Grace.
Thank you.
And so I guess one of the things you wanted to talk about is the bridge behind the Coast Guard Museum.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if under old business you wanted to do things in order.
We
or-
don't have to do them in
You
order.
don't have to do them in order. Very good. So we are appearing through our contracted vendor at the Concom tomorrow for a notice of intent. We were finally able to move that through with the approvals of all of our plans. We had several meetings internally with the New England Mountain Bike Association, which is going to be providing the labor for sure, and most, if not half, of the materials to put in this bike. The bike trail in itself recognizes an alternate trail that bikers had developed.
We
because
would
it got
prefer,
wet.
excuse me, but we would prefer that you don't refer to it as a bike trail because it really is a multi-use walking but bikes are allowed. But we don't want to emphasize that it's a bike trail.
Fair enough.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think the New England Mountain Bike Association would at least like equal billing because
That's
they're going
right.
to put it in.
That's fine.
But they approached us about 3 years ago, and we went to Concom and said, we'd like to make sure we do this right, because the old trail for half of the year really tore up a delicate wetland that was back there. So they created this new trail, and walkers and bikers have both respected that. And we feel that by putting down a 4-foot wide surface that lays on the ground with just some basic rebar anchors, the methodology has all been approved by Concom staff, that what we can do is memorialize this new path and allow the wetlands to repopulate in native plants and then really protect that pool that is there. It's more prominent half the year during the wet season.
Yeah.
So what we're hoping is that people will simply adopt that new path and go. So the process in doing this right involved having to go out and get survey and wetland boundaries and do a lot of work that was more than what we expected when we thought we were just going to be able to kind of get some volunteers together on a weekend and off we go. Even to the point where we had to determine how we were going to get materials in and out. We're actually going to pre-cut materials at the head of the trail up behind the museum and bring them in, and we have the authority to use a trailer and an ATV, but we have to cross active railroad tracks, so there's some logistics associated with that.
Yeah.
There was some cutback on the trail that has to be done in order to accommodate the transportation, and then the seasons kind of turn, and
Yeah.
you have to go back in and think about those things again. But tomorrow, with the last stop at Concom, once we get that approval, then we can work through when the actual boardwalk will be put down.
Yeah.
There will be some signage that will be put up to inform people of the new trail, even though most people know of the new trail. But what we do is, there's a couple of sharp turns in order to make that.
Yeah.
Which won't pose a real problem for hikers, but anyone else who happens to be there. We just want to make sure we don't solve one problem and create a new one.
Yeah.
But it would appear that we are in the home stretch, and the installation should be the easy part compared to all of the permitting.
I had some questions about it. There's some feeling that it's not wet all the time, but I do think that seasonally, there are times when it's very wet. I mean, Doug has been on the trail when it's been very wet. And I was wondering, is the boardwalk something that's going to float, or is it fixed so that if it does get wet, that it's overflowed, or is it going to float and allow, or is it raised and allow critters to go in and out underneath?
An excellent question, one that came up recently during our planning meeting, and it's where we verified there will be 4x4 sleepers that will be created, and then you have your rails, and then you have your deck surface. So the deck surface should be 6 to 8 inches above the ground, and
Okay.
the sleepers will be secured with rebar that would go down into the ground. So
Yeah.
it will hold it there. The weight of it itself will be a deterrent from any kind of floating, and it's moved away enough that we won't see the kind of inundation with water that would
Okay.
really raise it up and move it.
Okay.
Of course, you don't ever want to say never, but
So I know one of the reasons we're doing this is to pull the trail away from private property, so that's to be commended. And there's also some hope that there are other parcels, pathways that need this kind of attention. Bridge Creek is one, that we can adopt the same method and move it to another location without having to wait as long as we did this time.
well, this was certainly a situation where, whether it was ignorance or what, but asking the question, how do we do it right? Because we want to come up with a procedure to do
Yeah.
this. And I think Darcy and Ed both said, well, if you're going to do it right, this is how you do it.
Okay.
And it meant that we had to find funding in order to get survey. We had to do wetlands flagging, and these were not pools of money that we had available, because originally, the mountain bike folks had showed up and said, hey, we got a grant, we'll just go do it.
Yeah,
And we said, hold up.
yeah.
Hold up. Let's make sure we do this right. So we do have a way to go about doing this. So the next time, it should be, if we follow the same path, should
Yeah.
be much quicker and much easier because we've
Yeah.
been through it once.
So we do have our eye on Bridge Creek
Okay.
as well. Yes, Doug?
I think it's very important. I'm Doug Payson from Barnstable Village. I walk on that trail every single day. I have walked through knee-deep water there, and other years it's quite dry right now, although you can see the wetlands on either side. But what I think is very important when the new trail is delineated, that it's closed off so that no one can access what I believe should be certified as a vernal pool. It is currently not a vernal pool, but that I've spoken to conservation that it should be a vernal pool. And it's very important that there's some area for amphibians to cross, because I did observe the blue-spotted salamander there, which is not supposed to be in Barnstable County.
Yeah.
It's not even in Bristol and Plymouth County. And I saw it, and it was wintertime, and I didn't get a photo of it because I kicked the leaves and it was underneath and it was below freezing. And I immediately dug out and put it back in and covered it over. And I have told conservation that, and they actually want me to go at night and listen for what is there. But there are feral people, so the idea of walking there myself at night, I'll have to get volunteers, somebody to walk with me. But I think it's important that there is some area for amphibians to pass, because they have to get back and forth between that wetland, and then to close off where it goes right along the edge of the vernal pool. And where it's staked out, if you go walk it, you can see where it's staked out. It will move it. There may have to be, I don't know, a chain or plantings or something to keep people.
Corridor.
Yeah, we need to keep people out of that vernal pool.
Okay.
Those salamanders points. should be spawning now.
Yeah, this is just the time. And different toads, frogs, other kinds of salamanders,
Wood frogs.
wood frogs that.
Peepers.
Peepers.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
No, that's great news.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, David, for all your work on that.
Put into that.
Yeah, it's been a rough couple of years, but we're glad it's coming to fruition. So I know you're also here to talk a little bit about the Pathways project with Barnstable Land Trust, maybe?
Yes, Grace was kind enough to give me a speech. This is as she wrote to me. A month ago, BLT approached the town for 2 potential trail systems. Asset Management is conducting a feasibility study to evaluate whether or not these trail systems can be implemented. One of the trails is to satisfy a grant for them.
Oh.
It is located in Marston's Mills and does not connect to existing pathways, as far as her understanding of this is. The second pathway is in conjunction with school and conservation property, which is, I believe, the property below the Centerville Elementary
Yeah.
School that has gone through
The Sylvia property.
the Sylvia property.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
once-
we just acquired, right? Well, it's been acquired, let's put it that way, and protected.
Yeah.
So there's a municipal piece that was actually donated to recreation, which
Yeah.
poses a whole different challenge in that there's this vestige of the Recreation Commission, which existed decades ago, and a lot of the Parks and Rec were part of a Parks and Rec Commission
Yeah.
that operated as a standalone commission and actually had quite a bit of authority. So much of the recreation land that is not active ball fields on school property is actually designated as recreation because of the way it was acquired decades ago.
Yeah.
we certainly don't have a Parks and Rec Commission any
Yeah.
longer, and it's DPW that maintains it, and the town manager, through asset management, that kind of manages it.
Yeah.
So we work very closely with Recreation. This is one of those properties where it was really designed to be an outdoor classroom for the schools at the time, but it was given to Recreation, has a Recreation dedication to it, and yet Recreation's not in a position to kind of develop it this
Yeah.
way. So fortunately, Barnstable Land Trust and Janet Milkman is going to be a viable partner, and we're going to be able to enhance kind of across the street
Yeah.
where all of that other land will be. So we finally have some movement on that as well. We do have to check on a couple of these title issues to see if there are any limitations, whether it's Article 97, or if there are going to be any restrictions that are buried within the titles.
Yeah.
So that we know what we can do and what we can't do. We're going to do some research on the existing boardwalks that were put in years ago, because that footprint may still be usable, because it predates
Yeah.
some of the restrictions. So we have a little bit of work to do on our side. We are in constant communication with BLT on a number of issues, and this is one of them.
I asked Grace, and I'm going to ask you also. We have very active people on this committee that are walkers and who are interested in pathways and have been involved. And I would like them, Farley Lewis is one of them, and then there are several others here. I would like them to be actively involved in these discussions. That's one of our charges. Here is pathways, but it also extends to trail systems. So I'm formally requesting that Farley, and if she wants to designate other people, to be involved in these discussions going forward.
Noted.
So just a quick, just so I've got this correctly in my head. So BLT is proposing 2 potential new paths, and they're not connecting to an existing trail system?
As far as I know. no.
Okay, all right, so they'd be standalone trails. Okay,
The one in Marston's Mills at Marston's Mills Center is on land that they recently acquired to
Sylvia.
the south of Mill Pond.
That's along
South of-
28.
It's along
Yeah, it
28.
must be
It's a
right
kind of a
along
weird-
28.
It's kind of a
Yeah,
weird
it's like,
parcel.
I know, I drove by it.
They want to make
Yeah.
a connection down to the town-owned parcel that is kind of left over from the intersection of 149, the last
Yeah.
time it was fixed.
yeah, yeah.
And the issue that we have is that we really don't have clear deed and title to that scrap, so we don't know
Oh,
if
they
there are
can
any
access it.
restrictions that sit
Yeah.
on it. So we can't really give someone permission to start to create an official trail if we don't know if we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had 2 different surveyors take a look at it. Some of our DPW folks have looked at it, and we really think it's tied in. We're going to have to de-engineer that whole 149 intersection that's there in order to find out what was there prior to the road being constructed. And that's a ton of work with a lot of dead ends, and you need the right kind of person to do that. Yet to be identified.
David, is the access so people can fish in the pond? Is that the thought of the trail, or is it, it's a very
People use
short
it to
walking
walk.
trail?
People use it now to walk to work at the Stop and Shop or,
Oh, well, that's important.
well, I mean, you know, to cut off the danger of 28.
On
Yeah,
a deadly road.
So that, you know, we cleaned out, I can't tell you how much trash
Yeah.
from that lot when BLT purchased it and took down the house.
What is PLT on that whole parcel there?
Where the house
Yeah,
was, and down, as David was saying, to a certain point on the
Yes.
shore.
Yeah.
But Mill Pond has filled in so much with silt
Right.
because of the lack of being dredged,
Yeah.
that it doesn't resemble, Mill Pond used to be back, I gather, when Dr. Higgins owned the red house there. He had a sign with a fish that he caught there. And the fish was like this. But it was a striper that had gotten into the stream and then decided to live there
Why not?
until Dr. Higgins caught it.
Interesting.
All right.
So anybody, any other discussion about we'll talk more about pathways in a minute, but as far as David's time, I don't want to.
Like I
So the
said, so
third
I'm
thing I
almost
think
5 to
was, we're doing well. Third thing was the Santuit Preserve.
Very familiar with this personally. I know that bringing Grace on board so that I have a property manager, she's been on the job for 6 months, and as experienced as she is in a number of different municipal areas, she's been working for the town in Yarmouth and then the town in several other capacities. There's a lot that has happened since that whole property was acquired years ago. We had a good burst of energy to try to update the management plan and try to reinvigorate all of that, and I
Yep.
think it was a decent effort, and like so many other things, people come and go, and the loss of Chris Ganella as a partner to this, he has stayed with the town and is now the interim director of community services, and I think that that is a very good spot for him, but it has certainly meant that a seasoned, energetic, driven individual who really cared about Santuit
Yeah,
is in a different location in town government, and you don't just find people like that.
no, he was
So
excellent.
We're struggling to try to kind of reinvigorate all of that. Recently, the deputy director for asset management position has been, it has been decided to let it remain empty, so it has not been filled, which has put a bit of a cramp on the style as we've lost 20% of our capacity upstairs. So it means that we've had to reshift and reprioritize. Grace is working on this, and I think that we will pull together a meeting in the near future, but even the people on our side has changed. And I
Well-
know that
So the only people we had on our side was Chris and Phyllis, right?
and I provided some staff support in, just because there was a
Right.
need for that.
So we are missing a Chris substitute.
And there has been a request by Phyllis to try to see if we can reshape the Barnstable contingent to kind of reflect where we want to go in the future. I don't want to speak for you.
All right.
We need a successor to Phyllis from this committee,
Correct.
which we sort of looked at Tracy for that. I don't know if Tracy's still in the land of,
Jury's out.
in this discussion, but
Owns the property.
yeah, that's why we picked him.
That's why I tried to interest him in joining us.
Is it true, Phyllis, that you're the chair of the management committee
Yeah.
for the
And
Santuit
Chris
Preserve?
Ganella, we made the management committee used to just be 3 people. It was myself, Drew McManus, and Steve from the state.
Right.
And when we redid the management plan with David, I said, we have no budget. So that I need another person on there who has budget money in the town of Barnstable. And we need a volunteer, so Drew McManus at that time, when I was not able to do it, has been busy himself, and what he needs is a volunteer to put on the Mashpee Committee. And I had proposed that Tracy take my seat on the management committee, and that would then fill it.
Well, the plan was to then find a replacement in DPW so that there was access to the materials
budget.
and the budget, and also the manpower, to be able to go in and do a spring cleanup, or to be able to bring over 10 or 12 people and the trucks. Having it be someone in asset management is nice, except that I don't have any of those resources.
Well, DPW did ask one person to do that, and I introduced that person to Tracy, and Tracy hasn't heard from him since.
No, they did come in.
Okay,
They
good.
came
They
in
did come in. There
at
was,
first.
it would have been nice to have spoken with them before and scheduled it, and know they were going to be there. But it was kind
You
of,
think they can hear him?
and it was late in the season as well, kind of. But,
Talk to the microphone.
sorry.
Yeah.
They did come in late in the season, mowed everything. We had talked about a couple of other things possibly that we didn't discuss any further, that we might have discussed. But, there wasn't kind of an avenue of communications, put it that way. I didn't feel that was the case at all.
I'm just hoping we can get I don't know what comes first, the cart or the horse, but if we could get the committee going and then fill in these spots. I'm just worried that it's been 3 years. They're supposed to meet at least once a year. And I know COVID got in there too, but, so we're losing momentum, and we need to, I think, get it going. They need to meet, and then this, I think, build it and they will come? I mean, have the meeting and they will come. That's what I'm hoping, that people will fill in.
As long as we can get a representative from Mashpee, a representative from Barnstable at the table, we can actually start some planning. And then what we found with the state is typically we send it up to Steve or whoever his equivalent is now. And they pretty much go along with it. They're interested in making sure that the two towns that have this joint custody are working together. And Drew is tremendous, but tremendous people tend to get 150% of what they can do.
Yeah.
And he's getting a lot done, but he's stretched pretty thin. And that's been the challenge, is just trying to find time for busy people to get together and get it done.
Well, I think the DPW director from Mashpee was also involved at one point. At least she was enthusiastic about it.
Yes, and well, she has left,
Catherine.
Oh,
Catherine Laurent.
Yep.
But she was instrumental in helping with the dam, and we've had a lot of problems with the dam. Of course, the dam and most of the lake are in Mashpee. And so the citizens of Mashpee almost think that the whole thing is their own. Unfortunately, even though we have the smallest amount of acreage there, we're responsible for a third of the debt.
yeah.
So it becomes an important place, and we've had a problem in the past with young men in their ATVs, and we've had squatters.
Vandalism?
Vandalism.
Yeah. So it's really important to get the committee going. Phyllis, I'm not speaking for you, but do you know a lot of people in Mashpee? Could you be helpful to David and Grace?
No, not as far as getting a volunteer. You see, you have to walk, when you have a preserve, you're its keeper, and you have to be out there, and I'm no longer able to be out there, but I was out there 3 times a week, walking it. And and then when I met Chris, he and I kind of got to know one another very well, and anything I wanted, he would try, even if it was on his own time, to help me with. And he's a marvelous person, and I'm so pleased he's done as well as he has with the town, because he certainly helped on not feeling that we were alone, but working with Mashpee on fire roads, brush cutting, and, the myriad of things that goes into that amount of property. It's a lot of property. And Mashpee has put a nice entrance over on 130. We do not have the resources to put a kiosk and much on the Lovell's Pond side of because we have no parking, and Conservation has told me they're not going to give me any more parking there.
And some of the access points run right between private residents.
Correct.
So there's no room to expand. So we have encouraged people to go to Mashpee and come onto the property.
Right.
I think that there's some opportunities. There are going to be a lot of challenges. Some of the work that we did get done with Chris was one time. It was getting rid of the pump house, it was getting the
Yes.
propane tank out, it was reestablishing fire roads. That was some pretty heavy-duty work. We still have some major erosion issues.
Yes, we do.
That need to be addressed because those become a safety concern. I know that there's trees that have come down. Just in the natural course of having that much property, you're gonna have tree growth. And we have illegal dumping, we have access down dirt roads. We put in a bridge, a small bridge that replaced a picket fence that was lying on top of two railroad rails.
Right.
A huge exposure there. But we need to get out and make sure that that bridge is still viable, because otherwise we'll have to make plans for that as well. So it's a big piece of property, there's a lot of work, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to bring the resources together and start to move ahead. Coming out of COVID, it's been a different set of demands across the board on the town.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of turnover and a lot of key positions, and that has been a very real challenge in almost every department to
Yeah.
try to manage. Hopefully, we're coming through it, and we can start to apply that effort.
Okay. So again, please include Phyllis in the discussion.
Will do.
Thank you. Yes,
I
Doug?
have a question. Is the consortium between Barnstable and Mashpee planning to rebuild that dam and the anadromous fish run?
It has
Right.
been. I mean, it has been.
It has been.
It was rebuilt again?
It was-
No,
Are they saying that the herring run now doesn't work?
well.
I had read that in
Drew
the
is
newspaper.
stream, yeah. Drew is in the stream making adjustments all the time,
Yep.
depending upon the amount of water coming up the Santuit River and going out the Santuit River.
Yes, somebody is doing that, but it looks like it works. I mean,
Well, the fish are running now.
I don't know if they're running this year, but, I mean, I've observed them for 4 or 5 years now. They can get up and down it.
Yeah.
And it was a massive amount of work to do that dam and the new fish ladder, and it's not going to get redone now, I don't think.
No.
It might be modified somehow, but
Should go to conservation? Thank you. Town of Barnstable. Yes, Chris?
If I may ask, by any chance, I should have looked before I came here, is the original agreement for that was codified at the acquisition of the Santuit Preserve, is that document available online?
Well, I think the ironic thing is that the original management agreement was not actually fully ever executed.
No.
And that was one of the challenges.
Was.
But it turned out to be one of the opportunities.
Yes, it was.
Because it had never been finally completed, we were allowed to tinker with it and create
The
a
land
better one.
bank. It was right at the time of the land bank turning into CPC.
So now the new one that we have, I believe that was signed by everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, it
So
was.
that is really the current one.
Two towns and the
Yep.
state, the one that David and I worked on, yes.
I think we were directing people to the Mashpee website in order to get information about the Santuit Preserve, only because we felt it was better to have all the information in one portal. We could potentially work with IT to see, but that would be, again, another action item that the committee could take
Yes,
up
it
as
would
to
be.
how to include that information and make it available to all.
Actually, I've seen the Santuit Management Plan on our own website.
Okay, very good.
Yes, it is.
There's a lot of
So-
information on that
Yeah.
website, so.
Thank you.
So any further discussion about this item? Okay, guess what?
If I can bid my adieu, as
You
I
may.
have another round of presentation to do.
Well, good luck with that.
And
When,
Grace will be back.
when do you plan to, when is this going before the town council? The CR?
I am hoping for a first read on the April 27th meeting, so that we can get a second read the first meeting of May.
Okay.
So that the Katuitt Fire District at their annual meeting, which I believe is May 30th, has a clear direction so that they can accept what is being offered.
Okay.
If we miss that meeting, then it looks like there would need to be a special meeting by the fire district, which costs money in order for them to accept. So we are trying as best we can to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay.
We're meeting with legal on Wednesday to make sure that we have the internal path ready so that we know exactly what the document is going to be, what's the appropriate way to take the soon-to-be divided parcels.
Yeah.
And make sure that all of that information is ready to go for town council.
Okay.
I'll have a better idea after that meeting on Wednesday.
So we'll prepare a letter of recommended approval for the town council. Do I need to do one for conservation? Are you going before conservation or CPC or anybody else?
We will eventually go to conservation for the conservation restriction. That is yet to be scheduled. Originally, we were hoping to get before Concom tomorrow, but we couldn't meet with legal last week in order to get onto the agenda. So I believe that we will have at one of the future Concom meetings, again,
Okay.
in time for the Katuitt Fire District meeting. So any support we can get would be wonderful.
Okay. Typically, we recommend to both entities.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much,
you.
David.
Nice to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, all right, we skipped around a little bit. Let's see what we haven't done. Update on status of outstanding conservation restrictions. Sylvia has been recorded. Harju, Amaral, and Prince Ave are still at the state. And as Jackie's pointed out, may remain there indefinitely.
Yeah, I don't know anything about those conservation restrictions. I just know,
One of them is 2015.
I know that they were created a long time ago. And so I just don't know where they stand in relevance in the town.
Well, they've been approved on this level. They've been to state back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. This legal department has a little bit,
Got a backlog.
well, ours is doing quite well with these CRs, but now. So the walking weekend and the walking library, I know, is it Alicia Miser? Has been working very hard on creating a walking library. How is that going,
Indeed,
Farley?
and she's been very responsive. We've been back and forth emailing each other, and Lisa and I have responded to all her communication, and it's moving right along. I've put in another walk this morning with her, and so it's definitely up and running. I just wanted to report on walking weekend. At this point, we have 4 walks, and they're Saturday and Sunday. We have nobody interested in leading a walk on Friday. So, but the other 2, the 2 days of Saturday and Sunday are great walks. They're, so.
Now, do you usually have a lot of participants for Friday walks?
Not always, no.
Varies.
Yeah.
Varies.
Yeah,
Varies?
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I was thinking that it wouldn't be tragic if you didn't have a Friday walk.
Right.
Do you have like Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon
Right.
walks, both?
Both Saturday, Sunday morning.
And Sunday
afternoon.
morning and afternoon? That's pretty good.
So, yeah, I mean, spring has always been the least attended of the 2 walking weekends. And so I think Lisa and I are offering to do a through hike starting in West Barnstable and going through to Barnstable Village in 2 days. So,
Cool, good.
yeah. So,
Nice.
I don't know, Doug, you.
I had wanted to do it, and I'm just, at this point, I'm kind of overwhelmed with everything.
Sure.
And I'll probably go.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I can put the energy and effort
That's
into
fine. You've
leading
done-
one right now.
You've done lots, so I appreciate that. And
Okay.
so I think we're fine, at this point, unless somebody pops up and wants to do something on Friday.
Chris, are you doing one?
Yep.
Yep. So Farley, Alyssa, Chris, and who else?
And Jack Ahern is at BLT, is doing a walk for, at Bell's Farm. Yeah.
Has Audubon,
I didn't reach out to them because last year we did something with them and we had, well, I showed up, a friend of mine showed up and one other person.
Me.
So, oh, yeah, right, and Doug, yeah, Audubon, yeah, right. And there was one other, I think
With
there was a
Ian Ives.
woman, yeah.
didn't
Anyway,
the Audubon advertise it at all?
Pardon?
Didn't the Audubon advertise it at all?
Our walks, or?
Yeah, the one that you had with them.
Oh, yeah, I think they might have, but it was more on us, because I had asked them to do it.
Yeah, but I would have thought they have a great network. It would have been
Right.
good if he
Yeah, it was-
advertised it. So how about Sandy Neck? Nina Coleman, and,
I didn't reach out to her. I haven't had much
because usually they
success.
have one too.
Yeah, Sandy Neck is, I think can be challenging for a lot of people because of the heavy sand,
Yes.
so,
It is.
Yeah,
It's a hard
yeah.
walk.
yeah,
Well, just ideas,
yeah, so.
so.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, perhaps in the fall, we'll have a better opportunity to get more people out,
Right,
so.
okay.
Do we have a brochure yet?
No, we don't. Because,
Well,
We're not-
We're still developing the,
yeah, so, but I think, Gina, as long as we're not seeing any more contributions at this point, maybe we can just go ahead and get started with the brochure, if
Yeah.
that's okay.
I have it all ready to go, just ready to fill in anymore, so it's
Okay.
pretty much done.
Great,
So
okay.
I can send that around and print some.
That's why we
And
pay
then
you
we
the
need
big
to
bucks.
get that into the Barnstable Week.
I can send that in
Yeah,
also.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
I have talked with the director of Centerville Library because they have a sandwich board that they put outside. And I have noticed personally myself, if I see an event on that versus the table near where you check books out has loaded with pamphlets, I
Yeah.
never bother to look at that. But I see the sandwich board and I all of a sudden go, oh, and put it in my calendar and go. So she is going to get back to me hopefully
Good.
tomorrow if we can use that sandwich board. I've
great.
also been over to Osterville and they've said no.
Surprising.
But I will probably be calling several of you, like West Barnstable, to see if we can go into the libraries together. Maybe they recognize you guys so that maybe we can,
And use their sandwich
and
board?
use their sandwich
Oh,
board.
okay, because Sturgis
Barnstable-
always puts up a poster
Right,
for us.
but I think they're much more noticed
Yeah.
than the table with the pamphlets.
Yeah, we have a bulletin board in Barnstable Village. That's a community board that could be
Right.
used. We also have the Barnstable Fire.
That's what I was
Puts-
wondering.
yeah.
if they let
Oh,
us-
that's,
They might, if you ask.
Yeah, they would do it if
They
You
would
might as
do
well
it.
ask.
Yep.
Could you
Walking
ask?
weekend and have the two dates
So Barnstable
and
Fire.
some way to,
The Katuitt Library, we have a sandwich board.
So
yeah.
what would we put on the Barnstable Fire Department? Just
Walking
weekends?
And
I
then
thought
maybe
it- And
the,
then,
Check the website or something
and
like?
then a plastic bag with the flyers in it.
Oh, okay.
So just walking weekend in the date, and then, if you're interested, there's the flyer.
oh, I don't know if we could do that with Barnstable Village, but, walking weekend and maybe the website
Yeah, okay.
Right.
reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the dates.
Yeah.
They're very good about putting stuff on.
So let's see what we have here. We're running out of time here, but do we have an update on the Twin Brooks project? Liz?
No. Not anything more than what you've read in the paper about, John
That it's under
Julius-
appeal?
John Julius.
Oh, been great.
Appeal, right? Okay. So the Centerville Cranberry Bog is still in litigation? Does anybody know?
I asked my son who lives near there, and he said it's just going where it's going, which I think means they're pushing it. I mean, there's a couple of lawyers that live right there, and then my son lives 5 houses down from it, and he's a civil engineer.
But there's no, is there litigation or no litigation?
I believe they're trying to get together litigation.
Oh.
I don't believe there is litigation right now, but they.
Oh. We keep that on our
I'll
agenda
check with
just
myself.
to see what's going on.
Matt Dupuy.
So Farley, do we have any updates from the Community Preservation Committee?
Preservation, I just, to let you know that under correspondence received, there was a letter dated February 27th, 2023, to Mark Ells from Ann Kennedy, Chair of LAPC, copy to CPC Chairman, regarding a unanimous vote of the LAPC to recommend consideration of a CPC-funded purchase of the 18-acre vacant parcel at 2320 Meeting House Way, West Barnstable, for water protection purposes. So they have engaged an appraiser for this. They're looking for an engineer to evaluate just how this would all work out. And I guess the question was, how much property does the water department own? And nobody seemed to know, so.
The West Barnstable?
Which water?
The West Barnstable Water District owns no property.
No property, but.
Yeah.
It does have control of the 400-foot Zone 1
Okay.
around a well behind the fire station. But this would be an initiative by the Hyannis Water Board, or a
Right.
recommendation by the Hyannis Water
And
Board
so
to
I
the
think-
town manager
Yeah,
for Town of Barnstable acquisition.
right. So I think that was actually the number they were looking for was for the Hyannis Water Board property holdings.
Which is
So,
owned by the town. I keep reminding people, the Hyannis Water Department is owned by all of us.
us.
Yes. So it really shouldn't be called the Hyannis Water District. It should be the Barnstable Water District.
So many overlays of jurisdictions and names. Yeah, it's confusing. Anyway, I was curious.
I
But
believe that's being considered, is the, changing the name of the, it's actually the Water Supply Division of the Town of Barnstable. And the advisory board to the town manager is called the Hyannis Water Board. And actually, Steve
O'Neill.
O'Neill, who used to be on this,
Yeah.
on this committee, his wife serves on,
Right, Louise.
and actually Steve served on the Hyannis Water Board. But I do think that that it is under consideration to think about
Clarified.
changing the name.
Yeah.
Because it serves more than Hyannis.
Right.
It serves some of the neighboring villages. And
Protection of that particular parcel serves all of us. But it's also very important to the people of West Barnstable because it's a beautiful open space area now. It's an iconic view. There's a lot of reason. Are there trails that go through it now that are actively
private
used?
property.
There is private property, but.
It is private property.
But it borders the Bridge Creek, right? So, yeah, so that's
And
what I
it is
meant
under
with
Chapter
trails.
61B, so that it would, if it were there have been offers, or the property has been looked at, from my understanding, by interested parties.
yeah.
And if the family were to receive an offer, the town would have, I believe, 90 days to respond because of
Yeah.
a right of first
The
refusal.
right of
with
first
the
refusal again.
61B.
Yep.
But I do think that there are some issues about the configuration of the subdivision that it's part
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
So,
There's some challenges because there are existing easements and other things
but I believe
involved.
that all of that would be reflected in the appraisal.
Yeah,
So-
and they would come out and remap it and all of that.
So I think we've covered everything.
What about the name change?
Unless any, pardon me?
The name change?
Oh,
The name
Where's
game.
the status of the name change?
as you know, I met with Matt Levesque and about it. I also went back to him about a week ago and said, what's going on? And he said he would talk to the attorney, Karen Nober, about it. That's the last I heard. So my goal is to have this before the town council, before Jessica Rapcrissetti has to step down because of term limits, because she was instrumental in helping to initiate this in the first place. And even though Chris is very supportive, I would like both of them to be involved in this discussion. So, Chris, could you urge the council president
I
to?
think you're actually a good person to advocate for this, because not only did you, as a council vice president, craft the language that birthed this committee at all, but you were able to convey to the council, town council president, Matt Levesque, how the committee has been effective in its tasks, and how there are some inconsistencies with the current code
Yeah.
in the language, and how we now function.
Yeah, we've evolved, and I was there at the beginning, and I do see that how we have evolved, and how some of our charges have taken precedence, and we've added new charges, and we'd like it reflected in our name and in our charges. So I think it's a very important thing that we would like to get done, and
Well, effectively, we have no influence over negotiations for land
Yeah.
acquisition.
Yeah.
So it's a miscommunication by the name title that
Yeah.
conveys to the public what we do.
Yeah.
Right there is
Yeah.
where I think is.
When we
just the
first initiated this, we were taking over from the land bank, and that committee did have that negotiating ability, but the community preservation committee then came after, and so they are the ones that do the negotiating. We do primarily recommendations, and so I think we needed to change that. And also, we've made public education part of this group, and we didn't have that as a charge. We do a lot of conservation restrictions, so we need to emphasize that. Santua Preserve is important to us, walking pathways.
That was always part of the charge.
Yeah.
So I think you can make the argument that you have been faithful to the charge that was voted by the town council, the then town council. What year was that? What year was that?
2005, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
It's pretty old.
But the name is not reflecting what
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
could or should be.
So we are really the Open Space Committee, and that's what we want to be.
And that's what most of the towns, 15 towns on the Cape,
Yeah,
call
are
themselves.
the Open Space Committees, yep.
So I think that would be consistent with what's going on.
So you're not off the hook. I'm asking you, please, as chair of this committee, to use your influence as a current town councilor,
I don't
because
have-
retired
I don't
ones
feel
don't
I
have that much influence.
I have to say. But what did I want? I should caution you that at our last council meeting, we must have taken about, I don't know, 60 or 70 agenda items and referred them to
Yeah.
April 27th, public hearing for the capital improvement plan.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what happens this time of year. But,
So
we,
our meetings go till midnight, 1
yeah,
o'clock.
so we got to have this,
So shoehorning too much stuff is not going
A
to
name change isn't
be
really gonna
embraced easily.
well, that's
Especially,
not my
I would say, hearing from David that there's a time-sensitive CR coming before town council, I would say that has time pressure and priority. The name change, I think you have to wait till July.
Well, it has a priority in that our main lady is leaving us.
Understood. But
So-
I think that if you
Season's
signal to the
greetings.
town council president that as soon as the budget season is over, you would like to make sure that this
Yeah.
is.
I wanted it done before, but, didn't
Started
get
on
done.
time and moved the meetings a little faster, we'd get there.
All right, so I think we've done. Does anybody, Phyllis, want to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, you're so good at this. So, do I have a second? Is that my phone? I hope not. All in favor?
Aye.
Goodbye.